year 2020 has been like no other. The coronavirus pandemic has decimated much of the world's economies and disrupted activities. But with the challenges come opportunities, as the world moves to create more innovative methods in addressing emerging complex issues affecting populations around. Trust Africa, with Global Alliance for Tax Justice and partners, mapped out strategies aimed at tackling illicit financial flows with a series of events. The latest was a forum on illicit financial flow with discussions centered on moves to raise more awareness on the need to combat illicit financial flow amid the global COVID-19 pandemic. Addressing the virtual summit, the Senegalese Minister of Economic Planning and International Partnerships highlighted the importance of the forum and its impact in tackling the threat of illicit financial flows to African economies.
Malgré un agenda chargé, j'ai tenu à délivrer un message pour cette édition 2020.
I am delighted to deliver a message at the 2020 edition of the Pan-African Conference on the Illicit Financial Flows. I wish to express my congratulations for your noble fight which aims to preserve the African resources. This year's theme calls us in many ways. In fact, since a few months back, humanity is confronted with the COVID-19 that has affected our societies, our lifestyles, and has also affected African economies. African countries have reacted by taking measures to tackle and increase resilience of the population and businesses. Senegal, under the leadership of Excellency President Macky Sall, has come up with a program of economic and social development to cushion the effect of the pandemic. After the resilience phase, it will be important to reflect on the initiative that has to be put in place to drive durable economic development. In this framework, Senegal has developed new ideas to stimulate economic development.
Économique et sociale, la presse.
The COVID-19 pandemic has had a huge socio-economic impact on the African economy, exposing its weak endogenous economic structures and health system. According to African Union report on the socio-economic impact of COVID-19 in Africa, growth rate for the continent is estimated to drop to negative for the year 2020 between minus 4.9% to minus 2.1%.
In ensuring a successful campaign, Trust Africa built solid partnerships with other organizations, including media partners such as the Gambia Radio and Television Services, GRTS, of the Gambia. During the virtual conference on combating illicit financial flows, it is reported that illicit financial flows affects economies the world over, but most especially developing countries. The cost of the effects of illicit financial flows mainly places damaging effect on key areas, thereby robbing economies significant revenue flows. Additionally, the forum noted the impact of illicit financial flow on state institutions, affecting their viability and operations. Trust Africa and Tax Justice Network Africa hosted the Pan-African Conference, which focused on illicit financial flows and taxation. The summit's 2020 theme profiles the Africa we want post-COVID-19, optimizing domestic resource mobilization from the extractive sector for Africa's transformation.
The African transformation agenda hasn't changed with the pandemic. If anything, it has become more compelling. The extreme dependence and vulnerability of our economies to external shocks have become more obvious than ever. Development aid, foreign direct investments, and remittances from the African diaspora, which perhaps together are the most important sources of development finance, have all suddenly been seriously reduced, if not stopped, in a number of ways, as a result of the pandemic and some of the responses to the pandemic and the global economic crisis that followed the outbreak of the pandemic. And so continuing to rely on those sources, development aid, foreign direct investments and so on, for development finance would mean compromising our chances of achieving sustainable development goals and the goals of the African Union's Agenda 2063.
Experts dilated on some critical issues and ways of tackling illicit financial flows, with many agreeing that more needs to be done for multilateral partnerships in combating the spread of illicit financial flows.
They don't have to, really. They set transfer pricing guidelines, and countries, it's up to them whether they want to follow these guidelines. They give you options on how you can settle a dispute through mutual agreement procedure. Again, it's up to countries. So what these institutions are doing, the UN and the OECD, are really just giving you options. They're not. It's not like the World Trade Organization where you're bound by these rules and there's a centralized system for dispute settlement. So in that sense, the international tax system is not that integrated as you would think. It's actually really just it's quite domestic in that sense. So countries taking more and more steps to safeguard their revenue interests with the COVID pandemic, with these tech giants having record profits, every day. It's not a bad thing, really. The obligation of every government is towards the people, not towards some abstract idea of multilateralism. So that in that sense, it's not such a bad thing, and in fact, it's a good thing because the proliferation of these measures has actually hastened the discussion. The discussion on the digitalized economy is going on since 2015. Countries are just talking and talking and talking, and finally, when countries began taking unilateral measures, is when there was this big hurry on finding a solution. So I think it would, in fact, add pressure, especially when developing countries do it. Those things which they cannot get through the multilateral negotiations, they should bring in national measures so that the multilateral discussions are forced to take note of these things. Otherwise, the developed countries will not really listen.
The forum also provided participants to discuss valuable individual experiences and how these lessons, such as information sharing, can help in addressing issues affecting development on the continent.
Cultivating a culture where politicians would defend the need for exchange of information to generate revenues remains a challenge, but there has been some substantial progress. And how countries can build on this, first of all, to encourage, to advocate, for instance, for increased awareness about the impact in terms of how do countries benefit by having this information shared. We need to show governments and the political decision makers the benefit side of having beneficial information shared amongst those who need it. First of all, it tends to make their investment regimes more transparent, and this will increase its certainty for investors. You need to show them the cost to the country or to the nation of not sharing or keeping information on beneficial ownership opaque. How much do they cease to lose? When a politician or a decision maker realizes that actually the benefits of having a transparent system outweigh the benefits. The benefits outweigh the cost. They are most likely to defend the objectives of having information sharing across countries. And we have also, countries should also invest a lot in outlining, for instance, collaborating with other institutions that are working on the same matters. Like in your opening remarks, you gave us how many countries have made requests, how much revenue has been generated. So we always encourage our partners in civil society members to make such information that is showing the benefit of sharing available for the political decision makers to take on.
The lessons learned from the virtual conference included the issue of individual governments moving to encourage more transparent measures and promoting greater advocacy through significant citizens' engagements in governance. These, as well as political awareness among citizens and the legislators. Also, the issue of public-private sector partnership is seen as a key tool in sharing information. However, experts say more funds need to be available in ensuring this is achieved.
On the financial component, as to whether African governments are ready to support financially, prioritization and resourcing remains key. A number of countries still have these hurdles, to overcome the funding component. Countries still have to prioritize and provide adequate resources for the EOI functions. That remains a baseline and must be established. However, inside there is the buy-in by stakeholders as well. The political leaders of governments have to go beyond just lip service to demonstrated commitment. Tax administrations themselves, because you find that sometimes there's lack of commitment, even within the administration. Support from regulatory agencies, private sector, and civil society, like even with my colleague, Robert Suna. Now in Uganda, for instance, one of the things I'll flag as what has been very, very important for us is that we have been able to get the adoption of AEOI integrated into the National Development Plan and the Domestic Revenue Mobilization Strategy. So this makes AEOI a priority for government to fund. And so we're also being measured as the Revenue Authority on the steps we're taking to pursue that. So government, in a sense, has tied itself and said, we want this, we know this will work, and so we're committed to helping you.
One thing that they mainly spoke about was mining, and this was because a lot of countries are now exploring extraction and looking for oil and mining. So that's becoming a huge problem, because whenever money is made from mining or the miners, they don't really see the huge impacts that they're supposed to see or that they're supposed to benefit from. So this being for third world countries, Africa is actually feeling the pinch because we're not actually getting what we should get from it. So that was one thing that was mentioned a lot in the conference. So mining was a topic, and there was actually tables and paragraphs and presentations being shown about how it's affecting our countries and how it's affecting Africa as a whole. Significant focus was placed on the need for increased multilateral treaties to combat illicit financial flows. This, according to experts, provide countries the opportunity to address certain barriers that come with negotiating bilateral agreements, especially in dealing with the threat of illicit financial flows.
The easiest quick win or way to strengthen your exchange of information capacity is to sign one of the multilateral treaties that will allow you to broaden the range of jurisdictions that you can actually exchange information with. Without that, nothing else can happen. And Africa, in a sense, is lucky in the same way that you were able to leapfrog past the need to lay telegraph wires all across the continent because of the invention of the mobile phone. The invention of the multilateral treaty allows you to bypass the need to enter into lots of bilateral negotiations with lots of different jurisdictions. So, for example, the G20 OECD transparency standard has 3 legs to it, and the first leg is to sign the OECD Multilateral Convention, sign and ratify. And Kenya, for example, have just ratified it very recently. Now, if I had to say, what impact would that have on your jurisdiction? Well, straight away, you then have the capacity to exchange information with 141 other jurisdictions. But it goes further than that. The different elements of the transparency standard work together. And if you sign the multilateral convention, then that also helps you with the third leg of the transparency standard, which is automatic exchange of information.
The various platforms created by the Trust Africa and partners provided participants from around the continent the opportunity to interact with experts and learn valuable lessons on key issues affecting our populations.